Rachel Mims is a board-certified art therapist and a licensed professional counselor, trained to provide cognitive process therapy, EMDR, and horticulture therapy. Rachel earned her bachelor's in horticultural science and women and gender studies from Texas Tech. Sorry. Her master's degree in art therapy from Florida State University. She is a U.S. military veteran who served in the U.S. Army for over a decade. Through her practice, deep in the heart of Texas therapy, Rachel works with patients who have experienced combat or sexual trauma and those whose mental health has been impacted by systemic inequities and trauma. Her approach is holistic and patient-focused, and one that employs creative, arts-based methods to improve mental health. Rachel is the editor of the 2021 publication, Art Therapy with Veterans, which is an invaluable resource that provides mental wellness strategies and guidelines for supporting our veteran population. Please join me in welcoming Rachel.
Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to start off telling you guys about art therapy. Does anybody here already know what is art therapy? Anybody? Okay, a couple people. Okay, so well, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I can do that. So he told you a little bit about me, but here's a little bit more. So I did serve in the U.S. Army for 10.5 years on active duty. And you can see this bottom left photo is the vehicle that I drove and operated when I was in the military. So it's a Patriot missile launcher, and it's really just a big truck with a big trailer. It sounds kind of fancy though. In this top left photo, that's me when I was stationed in Germany. We were doing an event called Mud Soldier, and as you can see, I was covered in mud. And then that bottom left photo is a picture from when I was stationed in South Korea. And then up at the top right, this is me around 2020-ish in front of a painting that I did. So after I left the Army, I went to Florida State University, and that's where I got my master's in art therapy. And then I came back to Texas because this is where I'm from, and I worked at Texas State Technical College for about 5 years in their Veterans Services Department. And then I went to the Veterans One Stop in Waco, which is a part of the local mental health authority, and they do all sorts of services for veterans and families for free. And I was providing art therapy and counseling for them. And then for almost 2 years now, I have been completely in private practice. I still work with veterans and their families by taking TRICARE and VA community care. And then I see people through insurance as well. And then I also do some consultations and then supervision for newly licensed individuals. Okay. Here's that book that he was telling you that I wrote. And then I've also been on the American Art Therapy Association's Board of Directors for the last couple of years. I've got 1 more year to go, and then I will be done with my term. And before that, I was on the North Texas Art Therapy Association's board. And from time to time, I write like a book chapter or something. Okay, so what is art therapy? So this is the definition according to the American Art Therapy Association, but this is quite a mouthful, right? So what I tell people is art therapy is using the art making process, the creative process to heal mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. This is my favorite cartoon about art therapy. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's a lot going on, right, when we first start. But as this individual starts to draw what's going on, and it gets onto the paper and out of them, and then they have this big sigh of relief. I feel so much better now, right? This is what art therapy is. Another cartoon that I like, kind of similar, a little bit different. This time, it looks like this person's kind of angry or mad, and they start to draw what they're feeling, and it leaves them, and it goes onto the paper. And then you can see like a much more pleasant, relaxed face, and they've changed color, right? So their mood has changed. So we're gonna do a little art activity right now, which is why you guys have paper and some mark making tools. So some of you have some crayons and some of you have some markers. It does not matter. What I want you to do first is I want you to just make a line down the paper, 2 lines, one horizontal, one vertical, so that you have 4 squares of your paper. They don't have to be perfect. All right. And now what we're going to do is we are going to work in our top left square. And you are going to pick a color that you have that represents happiness to you. And don't think too much, just pick one because I know you have a limited supply. And you're going to take this pencil marker and you're going to dance it across the page in what way happiness would look, right? So would happiness be like a curvy shape? Would happiness be a spirally shape? What would that look like? You only have about 20 seconds, so don't take too long. I'm going to time you. Okay, 10 seconds left. Okay, time is up. So now what you're going to do is you are going to put that one down, get a different color. This one's going to represent angry. What does angry look like? And this time you're going to think about what kind of motion or dance would angry do across your page, and that's what you're going to do. Just go to the whatever, next. It doesn't matter. Yes, I love seeing all the different ways that you guys are making marks. Okay, 5 seconds. Okay. All right, now, our next one, your next square, pick another square. The next color is going to be joy. What does joy look like? How does joy move across the page? Ten seconds left. Okay, our last one. Our last one's going to be peace. So do a representation of peace and what that looks like for you. Ten seconds. Okay, time is up. Now, guess what? You have all done art therapy. Congratulations. Okay, does anybody want to say anything about what this was like for them? If it was hard or difficult, or you enjoyed it or you hated it? Okay, back in the back. Okay, she appreciates that we had a timer so she didn't have to think too much. And up here in the front?
Each time you asked to draw something experiencing one of those emotions, I actually kind of experienced it as I was drawing it.
Yeah.
And that's how it came out.
Cool, thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, okay, thank you. Thanks for participating, y'all. Y'all didn't expect to have to do that when you showed up, huh? Okay, why is creative expression important? When we have creative expression in the therapy room, we're talking about art therapy, this helps our clients express things that they may not be able or willing to express otherwise, right? So it may just be too difficult for you to put into words, but you can create an image about it. Also, trauma is often stored in your brain as a picture. right? So that is why sometimes when we have experienced a traumatic event and somebody's asking us to talk about it in traditional therapy, that just may not be something that we're capable of doing. But we can create an image about the event or how it has impacted us. It also helps relieve stress and improve mood. And it can improve our self-esteem. And then this last one, I love this last one. We can use art to explain our experience to other people, right? So this is really helpful for veterans because a lot of times they may have a security clearance where they actually cannot talk about their experience, right? They cannot say what they went through. Or they may just feel like, I can't tell my family because it's gonna hurt them. But they can do an art piece and they can say, this is my experience. And it helps them bridge the gap and have a better relationship with their family, with their friends, with the community. Okay, so what does art therapy training look like? Art therapists all have, at the very least, a master's degree. That's what you have to start out with. So you can do that in a program that is specific to art therapy, or you can do that in a mental health counseling program. If somebody goes through a mental health counseling program, there's some additional postgraduate requirements because there are some things specific to utilizing art materials in the healing process that we want to make sure people know. So if they've just gone through a counseling program, they have to get some additional training to meet those requirements. Once they graduate, then they get this lovely ATRP credential, and what that stands for is Provisional Art Therapist. And that means that they are being supervised by somebody with a lot more experience while they are working with clients soon after they've graduated. So for a certain number of hours, right? So it'll be, I believe it's 1,000 for somebody who has that art therapy degree. And it's, I think, 1,500 for a mental health degree. And then once they've gotten all their required hours, they've been supervised, they can turn all that paperwork in and become an ATR, which is a registered art therapist. And then if they want, they can take our lovely board certification exam and become a board certified art therapist, this ATRBC. And this is a credential, it's not a license. So this does not guarantee that you can practice art therapy in every state in the United States. So down here at the bottom, it says some art therapists are also licensed as mental health counselors. So it depends on the state where they live, what they have to do. Some states have an art therapy license, and they turn in their ATR BC paperwork, and they get that license, they're good to go. Other states like Texas, for example, you have to go through the process of becoming a licensed professional counselor, and you do your art therapy stuff, and then you turn that into the board, and the board puts the lovely dash art therapist at the end of your LPC license. So it's a bit difficult here, but we've done it. And we're continuing to do it, and hopefully soon we'll have a art therapy license here, and it'll be a little bit easier. So who can benefit from art therapy? Everybody. All ages. So we start off with very young, like close to infant, like 1 year or so, working on like motor skills and things like that. We can go all the way through end of life and have hospice care or elder care. So any age. Mental health clients. So when I worked at the Veterans One Stop, we were part of the local mental health authority, right? We were focused a lot on mental health. Physical health clients. I had an internship where I worked at a rehabilitation hospital, and we utilized art therapy to help people recovering from things like car accidents or strokes. Emotional health clients. So a big life transition and you're struggling and you need some help, right? And then clients with spiritual needs. There are some therapists who specialize in spiritually focused art therapy, but pretty much anybody can help you with that. They don't have to be the same spirituality or religion as you in order to help you in that way. So, like I said, everybody, right? Where's it practiced? I gave you guys a little bit of examples, but schools. Schools, I believe, started in like the Florida area. It's really common there. There's art therapists in schools all over Florida, but in other states as well. Medical hospitals and rehabilitation facilities. I know here in Texas, we do have some art therapists that work up at Cook Children's in Fort Worth, and we have some in Baylor in Dallas, and I believe we have some in Houston as well. Nursing homes and adult daycare facilities, mental health clinics and hospitals, prisons and juvenile justice facilities. So I actually did some work in the county jail when I was working at the Veterans One Stop. I would go to the county jail and work with their program and do some therapy with them once or twice a week. And then shelters, so like a homeless shelter or domestic violence shelter. Nonprofits, for sure. Some of them are focused solely on providing art therapy to the community. Here in Austin, we have Community Arts. And then some nonprofits, it's like the nonprofit is about something else, but they want to bring in a mental health component. So they have an art therapist working with them, providing some services. Military bases and hospitals. Pete's going to tell you a little bit about that probably. Museums. So there's, this often goes hand in hand with museum education and how people experience exhibits when they come in to a museum. Forensic settings. So this is like court cases, right? And then private practice, of course. And then overseas. So there are people who go and do continuous volunteer work in specific places overseas, or people who like programs that will go like once a year for a couple of weeks to a particular location, and they train, a lot of times they train staff at that location or that site for them to then use art therapy or creative interventions with the people they work with locally. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples of art therapy that I have done with veterans. So this first one is mask making. So this is two different kinds of mask making on the slide here. On the left side, we are doing plaster masks where we have strips of plaster. We are molding it directly to their face. This is not okay for everybody because some people are claustrophobic or they're just not comfortable with other people touching their face or with closing their eyes and letting a partner help you with this, right? So when we do that kind of mask making, we also have the ability for people to do like a mask on a mold, or they can cast like their arm or their foot or some other part of their body. On the right side, you see a paper mache mask that was done. What we often have people think about when we're doing masks is, who do I portray to everybody else that I interact with? And who do I keep to myself? The real me that I don't share with other people. And the real me that I don't share with other people is on the inside. And that's what you see here, the inside of this mask. On the outside, this veteran had rainbows and glittery lipstick and big eyelashes. And she said, I show everybody that everything is okay. I'm put together and I'm just fine. And then you turn the mask over, and on the inside, this is how she really felt. She said, I cry so many tears, there is a lake of tears. And you can see all the cracks in the facade. You also see that there's a zipper on the mouth. She had been through military sexual trauma and spoke up about it and then was mistreated because of it. So I see this symbolism a lot for people who've had military sexual trauma, is cutting off their senses, right? They're not being listened to. People are not hearing what they say. Okay, so another example of art therapy that has been done with veterans is murals. So these are some photos from when I was at Florida State University. We did community murals once a year. And I know that there has been some community murals done for art therapy purposes here in Austin as well. And if you look, you can see me in those two photos on the left before I had pink hair. I actually think that was the semester they made me change it back to normal hair because of my internship site. But what I love about murals is when we do them, it's not me, the art therapist, who decides what we're painting. I work with the community or the group that I'm doing the mural with, and they decide what we're gonna paint, what message are we gonna portray, and then we put it up on the wall. And they do, I might help, but they do the painting, right? So this is a really cool thing to experience, because when you first start, everybody's like, I'm not an artist, I can't paint. I don't know how I'm gonna help you with that. And we start off really basic, right? Like, this is some grass, so we're gonna paint some green here. And then as we are going, we learn about shading and making it look more realistic. And by the end, they all feel accomplished and like artists, and they leave a message for whoever's gonna be viewing this mural. And so they feel like a sense of pride. This is pictures from the Peace Paper Project, which did also happen at FSU, but it happens all over the United States with Peace Paper Project and with Combat Paper. So what happens is veterans make paper out of their military uniforms and then screen print images from their time in service onto the paper. So you can see that paper making process in those first two videos. Photos, sorry. And then in the middle photo, I'm doing the screen printing portion. So, and then my favorite piece from when I did this as a participant was this one right here. And I called it Amalgam. And I said that it represented my transition from being in the service to being now a college student and like a civilian, right? Because the bottom, the gray part, was from my military uniform. And I showed you guys that picture that I used, right, in the very beginning of this program. And then at the top was a garnet t-shirt from Florida State that we pulped. And so it's got my before and after. All right, so here are a couple of photos from different workshops that I've done over the years with veterans or family members. So on the far left is, actually you can see my computer there because this is an online workshop that we did, watercolor wellness. So we actually made mandalas, and we did kind of a little basic, how do we use watercolors to relax and have wellness? And then we did some projects together. In the middle is a workshop with women veterans where we created hand-bound journals. And they were like not plain. So we spent the day like decorating all of these papers, and then we tore them down to size, and then we bound them together. So they already had a start to their journal when they left. And then this is a art journaling workshop with student veterans at Stephen F. Austin University. Okay, so I also led a spouse and veteran group for a little while, which brought the spouse and the veteran together with other couples. So it was a great way for them to bond and then meet other people while doing something creative and relaxing. So a couple of things that we did on that far left, we did some collage. Of course, I love collage. In the middle, this was like a book binding activity that we did. So all the different papers are there in that photo. And then paper marbling with shaving cream. It's the messiest, best smelling, fun activity. And you get beautiful paper in the end. Okay, so that is just a quick introduction to art therapy. If you guys want to learn more, the best place to do it is arttherapy.org, the American Art Therapy Association. They have annual conferences in different locations around the United States. You do not have to be an art therapist to attend. Also, each year we are having virtual conference. So that is something, if you wanted to attend, you don't have to be there in person. You can watch online. Then we have state and regional chapters. So here, you guys have South Texas Art Therapy Association. And then if you are the kind of person who wants to research, these are your keywords. In quotes, art therapy, creative arts therapy, or expressive therapies. So when I'm doing research, for example, I might put art therapy in quotes and in quotes, veteran. And then that way I get on anything that has to do with art therapy and veterans. So I think that's it. I just have references for you guys. And then now I think you get to hear Pete talk about his experience and all his art that he's made.
Great, thank you very much. I'm gonna introduce Peter. We'll get back here on camera. And then we'll save questions for the end. So everyone has paper and pencil, so you can write down questions so you don't forget them and ask them at the end as well. Peter Boutte is one of only 11 board-certified art therapists in the U.S. Department of Defense, and the only one who is a combat veteran. His military service of 26 years of combined active and reserve military service in the U.S. Army includes 8 overseas tours, 5 in combat. Peter is a lifelong artist who received his Bachelor's of Fine Arts from the School of Visual Arts in New York and his MFA from the Maine College of Art in Portland. His artwork spans diverse media, including painting, sculpture, mixed media, which you see actually here, which is very thankful for him to bring those in, and conceptual artworks. These artistic explorations delve into his personal experience in the military, the struggles faced by combat veterans, and related themes that connect with broader societal trauma that we have all been impacted by. His therapeutic practice is focused on creating safe, supportive spaces that gives active duty service members permission to explore creatively and therapeutically. Please welcome Peter.
Thank you. Before the slideshow even comes up, yes. First, I want to thank Rachel for really giving you a good kind of basic introduction and in service to what art therapy is. But before I continue, I'm going to invite you to stand up or remain seated as you wish. And we're going to do 3 deep breaths and 1 minute of just stillness and silence. When have you had a moment today to just remain silent? So, and once you're situated, if you feel comfortable, you're welcome to close your eyes. And if not, that's okay as well. I'm going to now invite you to gently breathe in through the nose and release through the mouth. Let's breathe in relaxation and let go of any stress. And one more. And gently release. Now for 1 minute, just rest, relax, and you get to do nothing. And when you're ready, feel free to gently open your eyes. And welcome to this moment. Yes. Okay. It works. I'm going to be giving a lot of gratitude and thanks to a number of folks I've met along the way. The very first person, he's here and present. Would you please stand up? If you haven't met him, Glenn Towery is the founder of the AVAFest, the Austin Veterans Arts Festival, which has been going on for many years. Glenn is my older art brother. I love it. Right? We just visited this weekend, brought the kids and shared artwork, and it's great. So, yeah, he's the reason why I'm here. All right. Yeah. So I'm Peter Boutte, an art therapist based 1 hour north in Fort Hood. I also want to recognize a number of other folks. Who here identifies as an artist? I see a lot of hands. That's awesome. Thank you, fellow creatives. Is there anybody here who is connected to the military, whether you served, family member, military related? Also, almost an equal number of hands. So this is the right audience. Okay, great. I also want to acknowledge some people that are not in the room, but I've brought their artwork. If you haven't had a moment to look at the art therapy pieces that I brought, please take your time. And there's write-ups. Okay, I want to acknowledge that over 950 service members, active duty service members that I've worked with as patients, they have enabled me to grow and become a better art therapist, one session at a time, whether individual sessions or group sessions. I titled this Becoming an Art Therapist to acknowledge that even with 9 years in the field, I still consider myself a work in process, a work in progress, and always in the state of becoming, right? I am absolutely better than I was last year, but hopefully I'll be even better next year. So this presentation, my message today basically is that trauma does not discriminate and it becomes a source of creativity. So watch where this goes in the slides. Okay. I'm going to start with, oh, yes. How did I get here? It is not a straight line, right? So the path includes tours overseas, Korea, Haiti, Bosnia, Iraq, Djibouti, making art in Paris, New York City, where else? And finally arriving here in Texas. This is the longest I've ever stayed, like since the age of 18. And so 9 years here. And just like you probably also have a very non-linear path, right? And that's okay. I also want to recognize my maternal grandfather, Stanley Young, who served in the Army Air Corps during World War II. He was a side gunner in a B-17 bomber airplane. He was part of a team that flew over Europe, and dropping bombs over Nazi positions. He served for a number of years and occasionally talked about his service. And like most enlisted troops in that generation, he lied about his age to get in the service. He strongly advised me to seek as much civilian and military education as possible. And at the same point in time, for most of his life, he was a self-medicated person with alcohol, was abusive to my grandmother, and only relented late in life when emphysema caught up with him. Now, not my biological father, but my adopted dad, served in the special forces in Vietnam fighting communism. He was physically and emotionally an abusive alcoholic nearly all his life until a stroke stopped that behavior for the remaining 4 months of his life. Now, even with their combat experiences, they never pursued any treatment or therapy in spite of their PTS, demonstrated PTS. So I dedicate my profession and my time as an art therapist to them, my grandfather and my dad. Now, I also want to thank my inner 5-year-old child. Growing up in a dysfunctional situation, making art has always been my release and a coping mechanism. So I want to publicly thank my 5-year-old inner child, who I am still in touch with on a daily basis, remaining curious and creative. And I invite you to thank your inner 5-year-old child too, right now. So next, I'm going to share some experiences and artworks that informed my becoming an art therapist. Of note, these artworks do not show images of combat, yet they do contain themes of psychological and emotional intensity. So I would consider my first successful sculpture as an undergraduate. It's called Self-Struggle. So it's a mirror about 2 meters high with a weighted rope behind it attached on the other side of the wall. The viewer is allowed to publicly and anonymously write something they're struggling with on a piece of paper and then pull on the rope and have a tug of war with oneself. So this was certainly initially for me. And then I realized, hey, this opens up to some other people. Psychologically, it relates to the Lacanian mirror phase of recognizing oneself in the mirror. And literary-wise, it also reflects my studies in existentialism as well. So even at that time, I was exploring my issues and letting others enter the work and explore their issues, all pre-therapy. Yeah. This sculpture is called Bang My Head. So I made a cast of my head in solid silicone and attached it to a drummer's foot pedal. And when I did that, the professor, this is in Paris, he's like, "Qu'est-ce que vous faites?" I'm like, "Je fais une jolie sculpture." I'm making a sculpture. So using your foot, you can activate the sculpture and bang your head against the wall. And there's powdered pigment impregnated into the forehead, so it always leaves like a mark on the wall. So I see it as a physical release for unspoken emotions and for others to let theirs out too. Many people love activating it. Okay. So this is a drawing made by my mother. After 30 years of marriage, she was emotionally and physically exhausted. So my intuition led me to ask her to draw a heart. She was talking about all these issues, things she wanted to no longer have in her life. So I asked her, what did she want to keep in her heart and what did she want to keep out? So finally, she was able to define and control what she wanted in her future. And it further opened my eyes how art can help others. Even my mom. This has become actually an art intervention that I use in my sessions and has been done over 350 times in individual and group sessions. Yeah. Okay, great. This is an ongoing project that lasted about 10 years. I remember right before falling asleep, kind of in that zone, right before falling, that hypnagogic state, I ended up having like a short video of probably what I thought was my earliest childhood memory. So I kind of wrote it out, draw it out, and I shared it with my family. And then for 10 years, I ended up collecting them, asking family members, friends, people I met on the street, on the plane, on the bus, on the train, whoever I met, restaurants, to just write and draw their earliest childhood memory. If our memory is a museum, what is that first object, that first experience? That was my question. It became a larger question, not just about my experience, but what about others? And so what you see here is about 200 of them. Ultimately, I collected 600 of them, and they were written in over 36 different languages. So already I'm starting to let others really enter and fill the content of the project. I just provide the structure and the space, and it gets filled. Yes. So in 2001, right, it was 9/11. So I was like, gosh, people were falling from the buildings. These are my people puzzles. These are structures, modular sculptures that are made with extruded polystyrene home insulation. So these figures are both flying and falling. And psychologically, emotionally, socially, people are puzzles. So I think that fits as a title. And then once as a visiting artist, students were able to cut out their own shapes, whatever gesture they wanted, whatever silhouette form they wanted, and then come together and decide how and where they wanted to fit in to collectively make the piece or remake the piece. And you got to see the dynamic of who went first, who became the holder of the central piece, who added first, last, whatever that dynamics were. So it became much more of a really interesting project as well, beyond just the form. Okay, great. So I got pulled from my studies in the Masters of Fine Arts program out of Portland, Maine, I only had one remaining semester to go and then deployed to Baghdad. So here's an artist, yeah, going overseas, activated as a reservist. My specialty was civil affairs, governance, and humanitarian operations. Our focus was to work with civilian leaders, mayors, police chiefs, water systems managers, and firefighters. Okay. During that time, this is a school. We're looking at schools to refix and refurbish, and schools were arsenals. So you see just stacks of Jordanian RPGs. And I would mark it with a GPS, report it to the engineers or the EOD, the explosive ordnance. They would come and collect it and then do a timed, planned explosion of this, just eliminating ordnance and ammunition. Yeah. So this is 03. Also at the same point in time, probably the biggest takeaway was working at the Ministry of Education. They're like, Pete, you were an art teacher once? Yeah, you're gonna go work at the Ministry of Education. Oh yeah, fully qualified, right? To fix schools. So I was working with non-governmental organizations, USAID, UNESCO, Bechtel, all kinds of contractors, non-governmental organizations, Koreans, everybody who wanted to contribute, fix and refurbish schools, okay? So the biggest takeaway was that of 15,000 schools nationwide in Iraq, we were able to, that first summer of 03, to fix 1,500, or a 10% solution. So I was able to brief that to the senior person in charge, and he said, I'll send it to Washington, D.C. today. Good. So never makes the headlines, but this is what I got to do. Now, at the same point in time, I was also working with linguists. And so during that time, I asked linguists to participate in kind of a brief project. So I cut the fabric of my pillowcase, right? A place of sleeping and dreaming. And I asked Iraqi translators what they dreamed for Iraq. And the responses were in Arabic, Armenian, English, and they're hoping for peace, prosperity, and unity. So even out of the humblest of materials, right? A marker and a pillowcase. You can really make some fun, interesting art. Now, when I returned to the United States, I intended to make art about my combat experience, and equally just as important, I returned to take care of my mother, who I learned was suffering from stage 4 terminal cancer. Yeah. So this sculpture is called Grenade Head. I brought it. Solid block aluminum, digitally milled out. Just don't pull the pin, we'll be okay. So it was made from a digital scan of my head and then sculpted by machine. It has a detonator screwed on top, and it represents my frustrations at the time. Also, that it's a reminder of my inability at that point in time to reverse my mother's situation. At least I was able to care for her during the last 6 months of her life. So all I did was make art about my combat experiences, including this and some more, as you'll see. Great. So returning to my MFA program with one last semester totally changed the whole thought process, my questioning process of art. So in place of, if you're familiar with, I won't get into Nicolas Bourriot and relational aesthetics, but the bigger question came from what can art be as far as a style or an aesthetic? What can art do, right? How can art be functional here? So you're starting to see this trend even before becoming a therapist. Yeah. So an ontology of doing, not being. Great. Now, so I asked my mom before she passed, you know, I'm a regular blood donor. I've given over 100 times since the age of 18. And when she was receiving chemotherapy, she was also receiving blood products, if you're familiar with that process. So she finally, after all my donations, became like the face of I'm an anonymous donor, and now there's no longer an anonymous recipient. And it gave all the more purpose why I continue to give blood. So before she passed, I said, Mom, can I organize a blood drive? a memorial blood drive in your name. She goes, 2 words. Yes, dear. So I did. It really became a diptych. I was working with 2 university campuses. So a whole circle of giving, right? The Red Cross and all the nurses and phlebotomists, radio stations giving free public service announcements, blood donors coming out of their own will and their own time. And the catch was, it was all in art studios. So artists were drawing portraits of the blood donors as they gave blood, and by the time the donorship was given, they would be given, oops, I think I have another slide, a portrait of themselves. And the piece was called Drawing Blood. So you never know how you can turn life experiences really into creative stuff. I'm really publicly grieving in, the process in public. I didn't know what else to do. Yeah. In addition to that, so this is the Target flag, right? It's kind of a mashup. I love Jasper Johns, right? The Targets and his flag series. Well, the Target flag became a flag. It became a tattoo on my arm. And this is my American flag since whenever I made it, 2004, 5. Yeah. I also turned them into magnets. So kind of segue into an art show in New York City. These are my combat boots. And I had, at that time, between 2003 and then my second tour going back to Iraq just before in 2007, across all the forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, over 5,000 service members had passed away in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I had the same number of magnets produced. So this is really a subtractive sculpture where you could take one and remember. Also in that show in New York City was really thinking of this notion of just ambiguous, complex grief and loss. I found the names of all the 5,000 plus that had passed away and had them all the names silk screened on these older military medical stretchers. Now, typically, right, someone's laying dormant or horizontal. To the reverse, I've got these standing up. So kind of symbolically trying to have them stand. Likewise, I'm using infusion pouches, medical infusion pouches. And in the evening of the opening of the show in New York City, we let them drip. And slowly over time, they would reveal the names. So here's a close-up. It's maybe hard to see, but there's lists. And the names and the ranks and the dates aren't fully revealed, and that's okay. That's part of the process as the fluid is dripping through. And once the infusion bags are complete, then the process and the artwork, I considered it to be complete. There we go. Then, having discovered that process, I also took my mother's face in her obituary and printed that black ink on a black canvas. And then for my own personal grieving, I took her morphine bags and let them drip and slowly reveal her obituary. So I think I discovered a way to really process complex grief and loss on a large scale, and then on a very individual, a very therapeutic way to process one's own loss. Yeah. All right. Now, in that show, when I was there, this lady comes up to me, and I want to recognize Debbie Farber. She's like, Pete. She's like, how do you know me? Well, you went to school here a couple of years ago. Great show. You're doing art, but you're also really making therapeutic art. I'm like, what? She's like, you should really foot stomp apply to my art therapy program. I'm the head of the art therapy department here at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. Foot stomp. I think you'll be accepted. Foot stomp. And maybe with a scholarship. Foot stomp. So I did, and I got accepted. And then I deployed again, and I couldn't start the program. So there's always this story of deploying, going to school, deploying. This was it was a 2-year program, typically, as we know. But it took me 5 years, because I deployed, completed the first year, deployed after this first year, completed the second year in the defense, and then graduated and deployed again. So you can't make this stuff up. So I was able to intern. If anybody's familiar with Rikers Island, the jail in New York City, it's an island, and it's all pre-sentencing. So they're just being kind of held on until the cases are dropped or they continue in the process. So that was they're like, you're a combat veteran. You're going to intern at Rikers Island. Thank you. May I have another? So it was DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, very limited in materials, right? I mean, right now in my current position, I've got a full range of materials, but this was like golf pencils, stubby pencils, no sharps, no shanks, no scissors. Things had to be maybe pre-made, a lot of poetry analysis, so there's minimal art making, creative stuff. But I brought in a staircase, and we talked about changing life traps and the steps it takes to change your thinking process. So that was just kind of a way to creatively process things, right, in a metaphorical, symbolical way. Yeah, messy stuff. So I also, second year, you're a combat veteran, you're gonna work with children, wards of the state, mentally, physically, sexually abused, 8, 9, and 10 years old. So it's all really oppositional defiance, ADHD, ADD, yeah, and looking for a home, transitioning to maybe to a family, whatever the case may be. Work with them, okay? The key metaphors, this was my thesis, was the visual vocabulary of the explosive child, right? So there's 2 things I'm going to show you. One of the go-to symbols is the volcano, the making your own personal volcano out of plaster, painting it, personalizing it, yeah. And then recognizing, gently challenging the child. What makes you explode? Let's write that down, okay? And what can calm your volcano? Yeah, so really garnering that resiliency, those strengths, those inner strengths that they do have, okay? And then, it was in drawings, it was in the sculptural process, and one time we ended up, the child who had already made a volcano and made it explode, we went out and we filled up a large liter soda bottle with just colored water of a cooler color. And so there, he was able to throw all the water, and it froze in the snow, as you can see, all blue, and he was cooling and calming down his volcano, having a real bad day. So let's just go out and throw water in the snow, colored water in the snow, right? Heck yeah, art therapy can do that. Great. So volcanoes were huge, symbolic. The other activity, believe it or not, is sewing, okay? The notion of repetitive action, repeated attachment. I need to attach, especially with a child who's lost those attachments, right? From family, from home, from people, from place. So I learned my lesson, my deepest lesson. Hold on, before you leave, you gotta listen to this. There's one quote, it's in the very next slide. What I learned from this 11-year-old child was this, and it was my entry into the art therapy world. While he was sewing, he said this: I'm trying to fix my heart. And that's the key to the door. Because aren't we all? I am. So you can learn the simplest and best lessons, right, from a child. Great. All right. The sculpture you see in the back area is also a digital sculpture, but what this is a part of four-phase sculpture project called Spirit of Survival. This first phase is near complete. This is from a drawing I did in Baghdad in 2008. Okay, So I was just notionally thinking of Greek sculptures, but also thinking of, fellow combat veterans who have invisible wounds and physical wounds, visual wounds. Okay, so this is kind of the concept drawing that really is driving what I'm currently making and for many years. So you see the result. One of them, is there. The first phase I scanned heads of service members who volunteered to become sculptures, and I wanted them to take a pose that best represents their mental state. Right, having TBI and PTS, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress. And so that one, and then some others that you'll see here, also represent that first series. Now, the second phase will be, I've already got a number of burn survivors, so scanning their torsos and all that. So we're getting more into the visual, visible wounds. The third phase will be service members who are still alive, who are amputees. And then the fourth phase, right, this finally arrived a few years ago, is that I'm going to go back to Iraq. A friend of mine, he's a Iraqi sculptor, who left his country 20 years ago, speaks great, obviously fluent Arabic, and he agreed that we'll go back to Baghdad, meet Iraqi veterans who suffer from TBI, PTS, those who are burn survivors, and also who are amputees, and scan them and show all the work. So that's the larger concept. The sculpture is still to come. Yeah. So you can see how my ideas have started with a germ of a self-struggle going all the way to this. I just wanted to share that with you. Great. And that's the piece right there, inside and out. And I love how the camera scans the outside and knows what to print. But then on the inside, the printer is lost in the sauce. And that, to me, really speaks to that inner turmoil. And I fully accept that PTS, that TBI. Great. And another example. I think these were on display here. Yeah. Yep. Just a short while, last year. Great. I don't know if we can take questions, or I'm going to go straight into becoming an art therapist, unless there's any questions at the moment. Because I'm transitioning from me as a knucklehead, conceptual artist, becoming an art therapist. Yes, sir. Hold on.
Okay. I noticed that your quest as an art therapist, and I do see that it was a quest, is about evolving and discovery. And I just wanted to really thank you for taking that trip, because I know that's not an easy trip for anyone to take, but you were dedicated, and I know you're still becoming, but wow, what you're going to become.
Thank you, my brother Glenn. I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, it's a process, right? We're all in this process together somehow. And we never ask for these life events to happen. So, but it becomes the ingredients for the art making, right? Make art about it, right, Gina? Right? Yeah, we always make art about it. And I was living that term before I even knew what it was. Okay, so here's the bigger framework that Peter was referencing, as far as the nationwide network that we have, all the way from Washington, D.C. to Alaska. Okay, so these are active duty military bases, Marines, Air Force, and Army, where we have art therapists, music therapists, and a couple of dance movement therapists as well. We all work purely with active duty service members. And then when they complete with us, whether retirement or PCS or chapter or whatever the case is, and we refer them on to the VA for further services, hopefully with that music therapist, art therapist, creative arts therapist who can receive them at their VA wherever they're going. Okay. So that's the bigger context. Great, this is our building, which I just drove from. I thought it was gonna be late because they gave me a last minute patient. It's a $23 million building that was donated by a philanthropist, and then it was handed over to the government. I either sold for $1 or just given, and so they have to maintain it from there. But it's a really good high-grade building. There we go. Bigger picture, right? We always work with goals, art therapy goals. So to kind of tie in with what Rachel was talking about, and this is the menu that I give to all service members in the very first session, right? What are your goals? And this is some of the ones that I offer, okay? And then there's, so these are not the art interventions themselves, right? But I have many back pocket, about 30 or 35 art therapy interventions that we can work towards a goal. So usually I have them define their many of them, choose them, and then choose their top 2. And, typical ones are decreasing stress and anxiety. If I was a vinyl DJ, right? I mean, that would be the number 1 request. But the real request is, I need coping skills to deal with life. So we're going to, take 3 breaths and relax for a minute. Something I never experienced in uniform. What? Doing nothing? And a culture where I always have to do something? So these are the goals I offer. Yes, I also give them in their first session, we don't make art, choose goals, and the brain education. Anybody familiar with the limbic system? Yes, great. So does this look familiar? It's very important stuff, right? Our thalamus helps us to pay attention. That's what I've been trying to activate this whole entire presentation. Same with Rachel, right? Now, the hippocampus, long and short-term memories. You may not remember this presentation, or you may remember bits and pieces of it. That's your hippocampus at work. And then finally, your amygdala. Maybe somewhere along the way, you've had an emotional response. Amy, the amygdala, is in charge of that emotional response, okay? Yeah, so I try to make it memorable for the service members. Why do these 3 things in the very center of our brain exist? One word, starts with an S. Bingo, watch this. So basic math, add up the thalamus, the hippocampus, and the amygdala, and it adds up to survival. This is the guard dog of our brain that wants us to survive, as opposed to the wormy thinking stuff on top, which is our wise, sage, cool owl. Right? So very frequently, the service members have an overactivated amygdala, and we talk about the fight and the flight and the freeze response. Do I have that on the slide? No, I don't. I should have put that in there as well, but yeah. The 3 Fs, fight, flight, freeze. Now, I'm going to wrap it up really quick. Here's an example of some of the things I offer. One of as final projects, especially in the groups that we have, is a collage. So with a collage, you can typically tell a story about yourself. Wonderful piece. All of them, all the service members do not claim to be artists, right? I always say it's not about ART, it's about what? TRY. How cool is that, right? Get over the speed bump. So here's a non-artist, absolutely defined non-artist. I can't draw a straight line. Well, guess what? You didn't have to. These are all contour marks, right? And he's navigating. He's literally telling us how he's navigated through his career and all these points, starting right from the explosive and dark side to the left, all the way through this terrain, finally to get to this side, across this ravine and this river, back to his family. Wonderful. 20-year career summed up in a collage. And with chalk pastels. I'd never seen that before. Brilliant. Another non-artist, right? Memory boxes, honoring family members, friends, and most significantly, those fallen battle buddies, right? And I brought, actually, this box you see pictured here is right here. It was literally one of the first ones ever made when I started 9 years ago, and it's just an emblematic piece, yeah, right? So there's 2 pieces exposed here. The outside, right? Honor yourself, and on the inside, honor your loss. And celebrate that person, really, yeah. So here we are, and finally, I'm close to wrapping it up. The mask making is also very common, right? Yeah, and I brought, of the 4 pictured there, I've got that one, this one right here on display. So what do you reveal? What do you conceal? And I'm not sure how much time we have, but the art making experience I have is maybe you turn your paper over where you made your emotions. Yeah. Now this is going to be a long-term project. I don't expect you, I'm not going to give you a time hack on it, okay? Maybe it's a homework for yourself. Hold on to that, okay? So I'll just give you the prompt, and maybe we'll close with that, okay? So whether you make 2 ovals next to each other, okay? So turn your paper kind of lengthwise, right? horizontally, those two ovals, make them pretty big, right? Because I'm going to invite you on the left side to consider, what do you reveal outside of your mask? This is your mask planner. And on the inside, the other oval, maybe to the right, what do you conceal? Yeah. And we'll just keep it at that. And I think with that, Rachel and I are open to your questions. And I know there's Peter's in charge, right?
Well, no, I just wanted to thank you both for great talks, and we have a ton of, I want to invite Rachel back up. You guys can come over here. We have a ton of questions from the chat, which I'll get to in a second. And also, if you guys have questions here, please raise your hands, and then we'll bring a mic around. And the reason we need you to talk in the mic is that way the remote audience will be able to hear your question. But I kind of want to start with maybe something a little bit abstract. One of the things that struck me in both your talks, and a lot of times I think we talk about a therapeutic journey, but at the same time, there's this constant going back, right, to past experiences, and maybe just talking a little bit about that, and kind of reliving things, or working that way. So, moving forward, but then also moving backwards. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, just the first thing that came up for me when you were saying that is something I tell my clients, is that I can't take away the fact that you've had this traumatic experience. It's never going to be something you didn't experience. But we can change how much it impacts you, right? So it will always be there. You might go back to it from time to time, but it will have less of a negative impact on your life.
Yeah, and two thoughts there. Like I say, I feel that since I've given myself permission to process my stuff through my art, even subconsciously, that gives that open space for service members to explore. They don't know any of this, other than maybe this grenade head on the windowsill, but I don't talk about my stuff to them. It's not my job. It's their time to process their stuff. And yeah, we cannot unsee or unfeel these experiences. It's how we change our perceptions of them, and how we change our perception of myself, right? Yeah.
Oh. Is there other questions from the audience?
Okay. I am, first of all, what is patrolling?
Patrol? Oh, okay. So this is on the goals list. Patrolling. Anybody familiar with patrolling? What would that be? Any ideas? Patrolling is at night. I wake up and I do my security checks in my house 3 or 4 times a night. Everybody, I would tell you, to a T, knows exactly what their security checklist is, because I have them write it out. And there's a certain point in their security checklist where they stop and pause. Typically, it's the front or back door, sometimes a garage door or a window. But there's a point where, and that's the entry point for me as an art therapist, to understand what image is coming up for them at that point in time. See? So yeah, so it's really kind of a flashback that's occurring during these security checks. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
So I am really curious about your artistic process. Your creativity is really fascinating to me, and the end product. And I'm wondering, does it all hit you at one time? Oh, this is my idea, I'm going to create it. Or does it kind of come to you slowly, or?
Right. So I use 2 metaphors. I definitely feel that as a fellow creative, I feel like I'm an antenna, and things oftentimes arrive very quickly, just like snap. I'm like, oh, there it is, out of the blue. So I usually have to capture it in a quick sketch, let it percolate. Sometimes it arrives quickly, or sometimes I'm working on some other projects. So yeah, where does it fall into the timeline? Some are slow burners. Okay, that's not so, but some of them are like, I got to get this out now. So great question. And then I also use the notion of a spigot. Sometimes it's off. Sometimes there's a few drops, and other times it's just gushing, right? So I see myself as an antenna or a spigot. Yeah. Does that make sense? Rachel?
No. Yeah, I actually just interviewed Pete like 2 weeks ago for a podcast I have about using art for wellness. And I asked him a very similar question because I said, do you start these really complex art projects with knowing everything that's going to go into this, like the significance behind it, the meaning? And he said, no, some of it comes as he's working, right? He has this kind of general idea, but then as he's working, more things come in.
I'm going to actually continue with this because we have a question that's really perfect, especially about the patrols aspect. Can you talk about some of the assignments you might give to your service members in a one-on-one session?
I think it really depends on the individual person and what they're struggling with. Because it's, even though we may do some of the same things with different people, it's really personalized to what they're experiencing and what is the like stuck point for them. But I definitely have done masks with lots of people. I've done projects where we explore identity for lots of people. A lot of times when we leave the service, like we have this idea of ourselves as I am a soldier because I was in the Army, right? I'm a soldier and this is how life is. And then when something happens and that's not how life is anymore, then who am I, right? And the military does not help you figure that out. They just say goodbye to you and you're on your way. So a lot of times it may have been years by the time they come to me and they're still kind of curious, who am I? What am I supposed to do with my life? And so we process things like that together.
Yeah, I'll just recount what happened today in a couple of sessions. One, he was stuck. About a month ago, I asked him to draw his biggest success or achievement. And he was like very rare. He had a blank piece of paper and all the materials, and he's willing to draw and done stuff before. He's like, Pete, after 5 minutes, he just took a pass. He's like, ooh, how is it that after 20 years of service, this person can't even recognize an achievement or a success, whether professional in the uniform or personal side or what have you. So I was like, wow, this might be problematic, right? It was for the moment, but also he's very reflective. So I give him his credit because a month later, I asked him, this last week, I said, what is your success? He's like, Pete, I know now. And he drew a wonderful drawing of this plant that was dropping seeds and had sprouts, and he was drawing each stem had a situation, and there were multitudes of personal and professional successes that he had, and there were sprouts growing underneath this plant. So the metaphor, the deep, rich metaphor, is right how he has helped others grow professionally and personally. Yeah, and the seeds he has planted. So I was like, oh, but it still wasn't enough last week because it was a line drawing in graphite. I'm like, usually if there's a lack of color or, I've got a whole kinds of materials, lack of color is a lack of affect. Yeah. So this session today, I said, could you visit this a little more? And he's like, yeah, I need to add some color to that. I'm like, yeah. See, so I didn't even have to suggest, really, it arrived. That's my point, right? Yeah.
So I didn't talk about this in my part, but one of the things that we kind of notice about artwork that people do in session are things like this, right? How much of the page are they using? What materials are they picking? Are they using colors or not? And we can see that change over time as they are healing and going along their journey.
Here's another one that happened twice today as well, is planning the process out, retire after 23, 25 years of service. I don't know who I am, what I'm going to do. Oh, wait, that's as easy, super easy, right? Take a piece of paper. All you have to do is draw a diagonal line on a piece of paper. They're like, what is this? It's your planning timeline. We're going to start with November 2025, plan out for a year, and just make little tick marks. Everybody knows what they're going to do. I'm like, mark it up. Oh my gosh, all I had to do was plan it out. Yeah, and map it. That's artwork, the text, right? Because if you fail to plan, you're going to plan to fail. We know that phrase in the military. And like, wait, I do have a plan. Yeah, are you going to fail? No. You've known success in the service. You're going to continue to know success.
Right. Other questions here?
So, how are you able to like basically be able to tell the differences between goals being achieved through children and through adulthood in that sense? And because of that, what kind of scales do you guys use? And does it differentiate between cultures? Because you mentioned earlier that you went to Armenia and you also went to Iraq, as opposed to the United States.
Yeah. So I work only with adults currently. So I do a lot of different things. I will use like psychological assessments, which are, numerically based on their symptoms that they're telling me how frequently they're experiencing certain symptoms. And that gives us like a number to look at, right? If you had a 54 and then 6 months later you have a 33, then we know that there's less symptoms. But I think my favorite way to assess is to go over it with them and say, hey, it's been 6 months. Let's talk about your treatment plan. This is what we said we were going to do. This was what we were trying to accomplish. And I'll go over all of it. And I'll say, well, how do you think we're doing? Have we made progress on some of these? Are some of these ones that we can get rid of completely? Is there anything new that we need to add? Because sometimes we like check mark all of these things. And now, because we got rid of those things, something else has come up, right? Now I need to pay attention to this other thing. So my favorite thing is to assess with them that way, like have them tell me about their experience and what they think.
Yeah, to that end as well. I mean, when I was an intern, we weren't using metrics and, grids and all this stuff. It was probably too formal. But what we were looking for was change behavior. I mean, they got art therapy almost as like the frosting for good behavior. You get art therapy. But we would do like kind of an after action review is what we call in the military. So I had every photographs of each child's artwork, and we would lay them all out. Sometimes the artworks weren't present or what have you, or they'd be destroyed or whatever the material. But look at what you've done. Yeah. Do you remember this? Yeah, that's the first thing I made. It was a mess. And look how you've contained the materials now. Look at the change in the shift, right? And you named all these artworks, okay? What have you learned? What do you see in this? What have you learned about yourself? So it's all about, for me, I've learned over 9 years, it's about helping them to gain their own insight and looking at the artwork collectively, right, over time, really lets them see who they are.
Yeah. It makes me think about clients who, right now I have several clients who have chronic health conditions. So they are with me long-term because they have continual things coming up because of different health conditions. And, after about a year, we'll go over this review process of like, how have things changed? And before we start the review of this is what we were looking at in the beginning, right? They may say, oh yeah, I'm still struggling. I haven't gotten any better. Or maybe they'll say, got a little bit better. And then when I say, okay, when you first came to me, this is what you said was the issue. You said, I can't leave my house to go do anything because after 15 minutes of being out of the house, my symptoms are so strong, I have to go home, right? Now, you're able to go out and do activities for 2 or 3 hours with your grandkids, right? They may not realize because it's been a gradual change, but when we do that review process, then they're really able to see the big shift.
Another question from the chat. We have a whole stack here. Have you ever worked with patients who suffer from Alzheimer's or Parkinson's? How do they benefit? Was there any positive changes in mood or memory?
So not mentioned in the slideshow is that I actually interned in a senior home as well with seniors with Alzheimer's. And there were about a dozen of them. And we'd tag team art therapy and music therapy. The only goal there was, because they were so beyond recognizing the self in a mirror, some couldn't even eat with utensils. So any ADLs were real. I mean, this is really deep, loss of identity. So what I would do, sometimes blocks, large format blocks, and just have them build something, arrange. There was no really stated goal, just handle the material and manipulate. and keeping them in the moment, that was the goal. The other activity that was really powerful was just taking a ball, like a soft, larger Nerf ball, and we would be at a table and just roll it to each other, and they would receive it and roll it to someone else. So it was kind of understood. They're going back, to that childhood and just interacting with each other. Of course, the game would stop with someone who would just hold the ball. And, I need something soft to squeeze. And everybody's like, anticipating. Okay, we're going to gently take this and re-roll the ball. But that was just keeping in the moment. Yeah, that was a heck of an experience as well.
So I was hired many years ago to do a trauma-focused group at a state veterans retirement home. But when I showed up, that was not the type of clients that I was given. I was given a lot of clients from the memory care unit, so dementia, Alzheimer clients. So I had to shift because we could not process trauma because they were not able to recall their experience in the military. So what we did is we did activities that would help with fine motor skills and socialization, because a lot of times they would just sit in a room and be quiet and not interact with anybody all day. So this was their chance to come do an activity and chat with somebody and like make a friend.
Other questions from the audience? Any questions here? I think I'm going to ask one more from here.
Make it a good one.
I know. There's a lot. I have too many good ones. That's the problem.
And Pete and I can just talk forever. So
Okay, how has your own art helped you navigate your grief and loss? Have you used similar practices with clients, and did anyone benefit from those practices?
yeah, I will say that I have been using art journaling or visual journaling, however you want to refer to it, to process things in my life for over 20 years. That's the biggest way. When something is hard for me, is I turn to my journal, and I definitely encourage clients to journal as well, because there's no rules for art journaling. It's whatever you need in that moment. So if you need to write a lot, you write a lot. If you need to do some scribbles, or you throw some paint down, or collage, or you need to do all the above, then you're doing it correctly as long as you are expressing something. So I've also, as you guys saw on the slides, I've led workshops where I teach people about art journaling so they can utilize this process as well. I think it can be useful for anybody. Like, give it a shot.
I think I've answered the question from my slideshow, but I would invite you to look at some of the memory boxes if you had a moment, and you really read about their own stories and processing their grief and loss, and you're welcome to open up and look inside. Yeah.
That's great. I think we're going to close out here. I have one more comment I want to read, but I do want to allow time so people can come and look at some of the artwork and talk to our guests. And I also want to say that if you're an ACC student, there are mental health resources available to you. If you are not an ACC student, there are other mental health resources available to you through different organizations. And so I think we have some brochures that we have here too. So if you want some of those, make sure you pick them up before you leave. And then the last comment is a great way to end here. And it says, I work with a Gulf War veteran who could benefit from this approach. I'm going to try with him next week. Thank you for sharing. So that's, I think, reason enough for us to do this event. It was just this one comment. So I just want to thank our speakers who have been phenomenal, and I want to thank everyone for coming. So thank you very much.